Well, the Biden's web of corruption keeps unwinding as new emails from 2014 show Joe Biden used a pseudonym to discuss a future White House hire with Hunter. Joining me now to talk about all this is Louisiana Congressman Mike Johnson. He's a member of the Judiciary Committee and House GOP Conference Chair. And Congressman, I should mention you're also a small business owner. And I just have to ask you, in light of these new numbers that came out today on jobs and what's been happening with inflation that we heard about this week, the price of oil spiking close to $86 a barrel. How concerned are you about the economy in the near future, in the next year or so?
Well, we're very concerned. I'm here in my home state of Louisiana, and I'm driving around, and all I see is help wanted signs everywhere, David. I mean, this jobs report offers little comfort to real Americans who are being squeezed in their family budgets by inflation. You know, interest rates are rising and savings are dwindling. You know, you got about 70% of the American people now admit that they're stressed about their finances, and for good reason, and they know who to blame. It's President Biden and the Democrats and their spending habits.
And, you know, the big businesses in America have gotten all these benefits over the Biden administration. All of the people with the loudest lobbyists down in Washington seem to get various benefits from certain green energy plans or whatever it was. But small businesses such as yours are really getting screwed. Forgive the vernacular, but I mean, they are getting screwed both by regulations and by threats of new taxes. It's not a good situation for small businesses, and that's where most of the jobs come from.
Yeah, that's the lifeblood of the economy. And you're exactly right. Every small business in every industry is struggling right now. And I hear about it everywhere I go. I've had town halls in my district this month. We've been on district work period, and people are desperate. And you have family businesses that have been second, third generation that are now in jeopardy for the first time of going under. They're struggling to keep up. And the lower income workers are the ones, of course, that are hit the hardest by all of this.
All right, let's switch over to the Biden investigations. The big picture here is the DOJ. I haven't seen this sort of thing, and I've been around a little longer than I care to remember, but I remember the Nixon administration. One of the key concerns of Americans that led to the potential for the impeachment of Nixon and his resignation was using the DOJ, using the Department of Justice for his own purposes, whatever they were. That was the greatest concern and what led to the inquiry of impeachment over him. It seems to be the same thing happening all over again, doesn't it? When you look at the way the DOJ has stuck its nose in these supposedly independent investigations going on?
Yes, they are impeding all of our investigations in the House, and that comparison is an important one. You go all the way back to the Nixon years, but what we're seeing right now, to your point, David, is unprecedented. There has never been a level of politicization and weaponization of the Department of Justice itself than what we're seeing right now. It's staggering. You know, the House Judiciary Committee that I serve on, the Select Committee on the Weaponization of the Federal Government, Oversight, Ways and Means, every one of our investigations they've stood in the way of, and you have federal agencies trying to protect the president. We have to, I believe, I'm on record now saying we have to move to the stage of an impeachment inquiry, because that allows us a newer and higher level of authority so that we can get the documents that we need that they've been trying to hide from us.
And I guess they actually pulled the executive privilege card in preventing information about whether or not the DOJ was communicating with David Weiss, who at that time, before, when he was U.S. attorney and supposedly had all this freedom to do anything he wanted. You're trying to get the correspondence between the DOJ and Weiss. You haven't been able to get it. How can you get it?
Well, we've issued subpoenas. I mean, at some point, it comes to a contempt of Congress level. But again, if we move into the impeachment inquiry phase, I think that we can skip over some of these steps. It requires them to turn over documents that they otherwise would not, because under normal circumstances, Congress is limited in its investigation authority to legislative purposes. Right now, we're trying to determine what we believe to be true, that the president is compromised by taking foreign money through bribes. And let's not forget, Article 2, Section 4 of the Constitution expressly states bribery as the second cause for a necessary impeachment. I mean, we have to follow the truth where it leads. We took an oath to uphold the Constitution, and that's exactly what's at stake right now.
And then, of course, some of these fake emails or emails with fake names that Joe Biden, as vice president, was using to communicate with his son indicate that there that Hunter was being brought into key planning for conversations with the president of Ukraine that might have had to do with the prosecutor who was looking into his son's business. The White House now says that information is protected by executive privilege, to which you say what?
I say that's absurd. Viktor Shokin has said specifically that Joe Biden paid the president of Ukraine $1 billion taxpayer dollars to remove Shokin from his job. Why? Because Shokin was a prosecutor investigating Hunter Biden and Burisma. I mean, this stuff makes Watergate look like a walk in the park. And I had my good friend Jamie Comer on my podcast yesterday, and we discussed this in detail, and he agrees on oversight. I agree in judiciary. We have got to take this to the next level because that's where the investigation leads. And he's putting together a timeline right now, by the way, of brand new evidence that's been uncovered that seems to indicate that Hunter Biden was flying around on Air Force Two during all of these underhanded dealings. And so we've got to get to the bottom of it. The American people deserve that.
Well, is the next step an impeachment inquiry?
Well, you heard Speaker McCarthy say that that's the next natural step, and I think it is. I mean, I definitely believe that. I think we'll have consensus among the House Republicans to do that because we have, again, an obligation under the Constitution to investigate these things and to follow the truth where it leads, whether it's politically wise or not. That's not our calculation when you're talking about impeachment accusations. We have to follow this all the way through. So the impeachment inquiry allows us that next step, and I think most of my colleagues are going to agree on that.
You know, then there is the problem of having a dual justice system where you have similar problems being investigated in different ways with different outcomes in regard to prosecution. And one of those is in the documents case, the case against, or the case that's being investigated of President Biden, who had documents, by the way, classified documents that he apparently took out when he was senator and vice president. So he wasn't covered by the Presidential Records Act. But Robert Hur, who's a special counsel looking into that whole thing, seems to be slow walking it, kind of like Weiss was doing with the Hunter investigation, which took 5 years. So that investigation might not be over until after the election, whereas for former President Trump, they are speeding that through as fast as possible. And again, President Trump can claim, maybe it's not a valid claim, but that he was covered by the Presidential Records Act, whereas Vice President Biden wasn't when he took all that stuff out of the White House to his open garage.
David, what you just articulated is exactly what the American people are seeing and feeling, that they're losing their faith in our institutions, the system of justice itself, because they see this two-tiered system at play, as you just described. I've done public events and town halls throughout my district in Louisiana over the last couple of weeks, and this is the first or second question asked in every single forum. Can we trust our system of justice? Look, we cannot maintain a constitutional republic, a system like ours, if the people lose their faith that we have equal justice under the law, that Lady Justice is still wearing the blindfold. They don't see that right now. And this is a constitutional crisis, in my view.
It was a crisis when Nixon was president, and it is a crisis. I would argue it's even a greater crisis now when you think of all the things that are going on. Congressman, great to see you. Thank you so much for being here. Appreciate it.